The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Princess Charlotte adjusted the delicate silk of her powder blue dress one final time. At 23, she had grown into the role of royal representative with grace and poise, though the weight of constant public scrutiny never quite left her shoulders. Today marked her first solo charity gala, an event she had been preparing for months, and the butterflies in her stomach reminded her of her very first public appearance as a child. Captain James Morrison stood at attention near the palace entrance, his trained eyes scanning the perimeter while his mind focused on the day's security protocols. At 31, he had served in the Royal Protection Unit for 7 years, but this assignment felt different. Princess Charlotte wasn't just another royal duty to him anymore, though he would never admit such thoughts aloud. Professional boundaries were sacred in his line of work, yet something about her genuine kindness and infectious laughter had made those boundaries increasingly difficult to maintain. The charity gala was being held at the prestigious Grosvenor House, a venue chosen for both its elegance and its manageable security parameters. Children from disadvantaged backgrounds across London would be attending, along with their families, celebrities, and media representatives. Princess Charlotte had insisted on making the event as accessible as possible, despite the security team's concerns about crowd control and multiple entry points. As the royal convoy prepared for departure, Morrison conducted his final briefings with the security team. Detective Inspector Sarah Wells would coordinate with local police, while Sergeants Thompson and Davies would manage crowd control at the venue. Morrison himself would remain closest to the princess throughout the event, a responsibility that had become both his greatest honor and his most challenging assignment. The dress Princess Charlotte wore that morning was a custom creation by one of Britain's most celebrated designers. The powder blue silk matched her eyes perfectly, while the intricate beadwork along the neckline caught the light beautifully. The garment had been fitted multiple times over the past month, with every detail scrutinized by both the royal wardrobe team and security personnel. Nobody could have predicted what would happen to it later that day. During the drive to Grosvenor House, Princess Charlotte reviewed her speech notes while Morrison monitored radio communications from the passenger seat. The relationship between them had evolved over the months from strictly professional to something warmer, though both maintained careful boundaries. She valued his quiet strength and unwavering dedication, while he admired her compassion and genuine desire to make a difference in people's lives. The venue buzzed with activity as they arrived. Photographers lined the red carpet, their cameras ready to capture every moment of the princess's entrance. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into a wonderland for the attending children, with colorful decorations, interactive displays, and entertainment stations throughout the space. The charity, which focused on providing educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, had outdone themselves in creating a magical atmosphere. Princess Charlotte's entrance was met with enthusiastic applause and the excited squeals of children who had never seen a real princess before. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, stopping to chat with families, pose for photographs, and listen to the children's stories. Morrison followed at a discreet distance, his eyes constantly scanning for potential threats while trying not to interfere with the princess's natural interactions. The event's first hour proceeded flawlessly. Princess Charlotte delivered her speech with passionate conviction, speaking about the importance of education and opportunity for all children. She announced a significant royal patronage for the charity, news that brought tears to the organizers' eyes and thunderous applause from the audience. The media captured every moment, and the positive coverage was already building momentum on social media platforms. During the meet and greet portion of the event, Princess Charlotte knelt down to speak with a shy 7-year-old girl named Emma, whose family had recently immigrated from Syria. The child had prepared a small drawing as a gift, and the princess accepted it with genuine delight, promising to display it in her private quarters. These were the moments that made all the protocol and scrutiny worthwhile for her, real connections with real people facing real challenges. Morrison watched this interaction with admiration, noting how naturally the princess connected with children. Her security training had taught her to be aware of her surroundings, but her compassion often overruled caution. It was both her greatest strength and his greatest concern as her protector. The ballroom was crowded, with multiple groups moving simultaneously, making his job increasingly complex as the event progressed. The catering staff moved efficiently through the crowd, serving refreshments and managing the various food stations. Security had vetted every staff member weeks in advance, but Morrison's training had taught him that threats could emerge from unexpected sources. He maintained constant communication with his team through discreet earpiece communications, coordinating movements and monitoring entry points throughout the venue. As the afternoon progressed, Princess Charlotte participated in various activities with the children. She judged a talent show, helped with craft projects, and even joined in a group dance that had everyone laughing. Her joy appeared genuine and infectious, bringing out the best in everyone around her. The event was shaping up to be one of her most successful public appearances, with preliminary media reports already praising her natural rapport with the children and families. The dress she wore continued to photograph beautifully under the ballroom's elegant lighting. The powder blue silk seemed to shimmer as she moved, and the intricate beadwork added an element of sophistication that balanced perfectly with the casual, child-friendly nature of the event. Royal fashion watchers would later note that this particular outfit struck an ideal balance between accessibility and regal elegance. Morrison found himself relaxing slightly as the event proceeded without incident. His team reported no security concerns, and the crowd remained enthusiastic but well-behaved. The princess seemed to be genuinely enjoying herself, which always made his job easier. When she was comfortable and happy, she moved more naturally, making it simpler for him to anticipate her movements and maintain proper security positioning. The charity's director, Mrs. Helen Patterson, approached Princess Charlotte during a brief lull in activities. She wanted to introduce the princess to several major donors who had made the event possible, including some international supporters who had traveled specifically for this occasion. These introductions were crucial for the charity's future funding, and Princess Charlotte understood the importance of making these connections despite her natural preference for spending time with the children. As they moved toward the VIP reception area, Morrison noticed a slight change in the crowd dynamics. More people seemed to be pressing forward, eager for photographs and interactions with the princess. The security team adjusted their positions accordingly, creating a subtle but effective buffer zone around her while still allowing for the natural flow of the event. This type of crowd management required constant vigilance and seamless coordination between team members. The international donors were impressed by Princess Charlotte's knowledge of their various countries and her genuine interest in global education initiatives. She spoke conversationally about recent developments in educational policy and asked thoughtful questions about their experiences supporting similar programs in their home countries. These conversations reinforced her reputation as a well-informed and engaged royal representative, someone who understood the broader context of the causes she supported. During these discussions, Morrison positioned himself strategically to monitor both the immediate conversation and the larger crowd movements. The ballroom remained busy, with children and families continuing to enjoy the various activities while media representatives captured ongoing footage for their evening broadcasts. The positive energy in the room was palpable, and everyone seemed to be having a genuinely enjoyable experience. Princess Charlotte excused herself from the donor conversations to return to the children's activities, explaining that she had promised to help judge a drawing contest before the event concluded. This decision perfectly illustrated her priorities and natural instincts. While she understood the importance of donor relations, her heart clearly lay with the direct beneficiaries of the charity's work. Morrison admired this quality in her, even as it sometimes complicated his security planning. The drawing contest featured artwork from children aged 5 to 12, with themes ranging from family portraits to fantastical creatures to dreams for the future. Princess Charlotte examined each piece carefully, offering encouraging comments and asking questions about the inspiration behind various drawings. Her genuine engagement with the children's creativity created some of the most heartwarming moments of the entire event. As she moved between the display tables examining the artwork, Morrison maintained his position nearby while coordinating with his team about the afternoon's remaining schedule. The event was planned to conclude within the hour, followed by brief media interviews and the departure procedure. Everything was proceeding according to plan, with no indication of the dramatic incident that was about to unfold and change everything for both the princess and her devoted protector. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the ballroom's tall windows created a golden atmosphere that photographers captured beautifully. Princess Charlotte's dress continued to photograph wonderfully, and her genuine joy at the children's creativity was evident in every image. The event had exceeded all expectations, setting a new standard for royal charity engagements and demonstrating the princess's growing confidence in her public role. Morrison's final security sweep of the afternoon revealed no concerns, and he began mentally preparing for the departure procedures. The princess had one more scheduled activity, a group photograph with all the attending children and their families, before the formal conclusion of the event. This would be followed by brief statements to the media and, then, the return journey to Kensington Palace. What none of them realized was that fate was about to intervene in a way that would test every aspect of Morrison's training and dedication to protecting the woman who had unknowingly captured his heart. The group photograph was scheduled to take place on the ballroom's main stage, where a professional photographer had set up elaborate lighting equipment to capture the moment perfectly. Princess Charlotte stood in the center of the arrangement, surrounded by nearly 50 children and their families, all beaming with excitement at being included in this historic moment. The photographer called out positioning instructions while Morrison and his team maintained their security perimeter around the elevated stage area. As the camera flashes began, Princess Charlotte felt a slight tug at her dress hem. She glanced down to see little Emma, the Syrian girl who had given her the drawing earlier, reaching up with tears in her eyes. The child had apparently tripped while trying to get closer to the princess for the photograph, and her small hand had caught in the delicate beadwork along the dress's lower edge. Princess Charlotte immediately knelt down to comfort the frightened child, not noticing the small tear that had appeared in the silk fabric. Morrison observed this interaction with growing concern, not because of any security threat, but because he noticed something the princess hadn't yet realized. The tear in her dress, though small initially, was positioned at a stress point in the garment's construction. The combination of the child's pull and the princess's movement to kneel had created a weakness in the silk that could potentially become a much larger problem. His training had taught him to anticipate problems before they escalated, and his instincts told him this situation required immediate attention. The photographer, unaware of the dress situation, continued directing the group for multiple shots. Princess Charlotte maintained her composure beautifully, comforting little Emma while posing naturally for the cameras. The other children pressed closer, eager to be near their royal visitor, creating additional pressure on the already compromised area of the dress. Morrison moved slightly closer, trying to assess the situation without drawing unwanted attention to a potential problem. Detective Inspector Wells noticed Morrison's subtle shift in position and followed his gaze to the princess's dress. Her trained eye immediately spotted the small tear and understood the implications. In royal protocol, wardrobe malfunctions were treated as serious incidents requiring immediate but discreet management. She began moving toward the stage while simultaneously alerting the rest of the security team through their communication system about the developing situation. As the photography session continued, Princess Charlotte noticed Morrison's slightly tense posture and followed his concerned gaze downward. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the tear, but years of royal training had taught her never to show alarm in public situations. Instead, she maintained her radiant smile while internally calculating how to manage the situation without causing embarrassment to herself, the charity, or the attending families who were having such a wonderful time. The tear began to widen slightly as Princess Charlotte stood up from comforting Emma. The silk fabric, already weakened, started to separate along the seam where the beadwork attached to the main body of the dress. Morrison realized they were dealing with a potential wardrobe emergency that could escalate rapidly if not handled immediately. His protective instincts kicked into overdrive, though he knew this type of crisis required delicate handling rather than his usual security protocols. Sergeant Thompson, positioned near the stage's side entrance, received Wells's discreet communication about the situation and began preparing contingency plans. The team had protocols for various types of emergencies, but wardrobe malfunctions required particularly careful management to protect the royals' dignity while ensuring continued public safety. The last thing anyone wanted was a media frenzy over something that could be managed discreetly with proper coordination. Princess Charlotte, realizing the severity of her situation, began moving more carefully to prevent further damage to the dress. However, the enthusiastic children continued to press around her for hugs and photographs, making it nearly impossible to avoid the movements that were causing the tear to spread. She caught Morrison's eye and gave him an almost imperceptible nod, their months of working together allowing for this type of silent communication during crisis situations. The photographer called for one final group shot, asking everyone to move closer together for a more intimate feeling photograph. Princess Charlotte smiled graciously while internally panicking as she felt the dress tear extend further up the seam. Morrison made his decision in that instant. Protocol demanded that he protect the princess's dignity at all costs, even if it meant drawing attention to himself or breaking normal security procedures. As the photographer raised his camera for the final shot, Morrison stepped forward quickly but smoothly, positioning himself directly behind Princess Charlotte. To outside observers, it appeared he was simply adjusting his security position for better crowd oversight. In reality, he was using his body and the length of his suit jacket to shield the growing tear from the camera's and crowd while giving the princess the coverage she desperately needed. Detective Inspector Wells immediately understood Morrison's strategy and began coordinating with the rest of the team to create additional visual barriers around the princess. Sergeant Davies moved to engage the photographer in conversation about technical settings, subtly encouraging him to work more quickly. Meanwhile, Sergeant Thompson began preparing the exit route, ensuring that the princess could leave the stage area as soon as the photography session concluded. The children and families, completely unaware of the drama unfolding, continued to pose enthusiastically for the cameras. Princess Charlotte maintained her composure remarkably, her years of public appearances having taught her how to project calm confidence even in stressful situations. She continued engaging warmly with the children while Morrison provided the discreet protection she needed, his presence both reassuring and professionally appropriate. Mrs. Patterson, the charity director, noticed the subtle changes in the security team's positioning but couldn't quite understand what was happening. Her primary concern was ensuring the photography session concluded successfully, as these images would be crucial for the charity's future fundraising efforts and media campaigns. She trusted the royal security team to handle whatever situation they were managing while she focused on her organizational responsibilities. As the photographer took his final shots, Morrison maintained his protective position while scanning the crowd for any signs that people were beginning to notice something unusual. The key to managing this type of crisis was preventing it from becoming public knowledge, which required seamless coordination between all team members and careful attention to crowd psychology. So far, the attendees remained focused on the excitement of meeting Princess Charlotte rather than noticing any problems. Princess Charlotte felt overwhelming gratitude toward Morrison for his quick thinking and professional response. His positioning behind her provided exactly the coverage she needed while appearing completely natural to outside observers. She realized in that moment how much she had come to rely on his judgment and protection, not just for physical security but for managing all types of challenging situations that arose during public appearances. The photography session finally concluded to enthusiastic applause from the children and families. Princess Charlotte began moving carefully toward the stage exit, with Morrison maintaining his protective position while the rest of the security team created a subtle corridor for their departure. The key now was getting the princess to a private area where the dress situation could be properly assessed and managed without public attention. Detective Inspector Wells had already contacted the venue management to secure a private room near the ballroom where the princess could address the wardrobe issue. The charity's event coordinator was informed that the princess needed a brief moment for touch-ups before the concluding remarks, an explanation that raised no suspicions while buying the necessary time to manage the crisis appropriately. As they moved through the crowd toward the exit, several attendees approached for final photographs and conversations. Princess Charlotte handled these interactions with her usual grace while Morrison coordinated their movements to minimize stress on the damaged dress. The tear had stabilized somewhat, but any sudden movements or additional strain could cause it to worsen dramatically, potentially creating a much more serious public relations situation. Little Emma, the child whose accident had inadvertently started the crisis, ran up to Princess Charlotte as they neared the exit. She wanted to apologize for pulling on the dress, having overheard adult conversations that suggested she might have caused some kind of problem. Princess Charlotte immediately knelt down carefully to reassure the child, telling her that accidents happen and that she had done nothing wrong. Morrison watched this interaction with a mixture of professional concern and personal admiration. Even while dealing with a potentially embarrassing crisis, Princess Charlotte's first priority was comforting a worried child. Her natural compassion and grace under pressure reinforced all the reasons he had come to respect and care for her so deeply, though he pushed such thoughts aside to focus on the immediate security requirements. The media representatives in attendance began preparing for the princess's concluding remarks, unaware of the crisis being managed by the security team. Their cameras and recording equipment were positioned to capture her final statements about the charity and the day's success. Morrison realized that the next few minutes would be crucial in determining whether this incident remained a minor, privately managed crisis or became a public spectacle requiring much more extensive damage control. As they reached the ballroom's side exit, Morrison felt a sense of relief that the first phase of crisis management had been successful. The princess's dignity had been protected, the event's positive atmosphere had been maintained, and none of the attendees seemed aware that anything unusual had occurred. However, he knew their challenges were far from over, as they still needed to address the dress repair and manage the remainder of the public appearance schedule. Princess Charlotte paused at the exit to wave goodbye to the children, many of whom had tears in their eyes at seeing their royal visitor depart. Morrison positioned himself to continue providing coverage while allowing her these final interactions with the young attendees. The genuine emotion between the princess and the children created beautiful final moments for the event, images that would certainly dominate the positive media coverage the following day. The security team's seamless coordination during this crisis had prevented what could have been a major embarrassment from becoming public knowledge. Morrison's quick thinking and professional response had protected not only Princess Charlotte's dignity but also the success of an important charity event that would benefit disadvantaged children across London. As they moved toward the private room where the dress situation could be properly addressed, both the princess and her protector understood that this incident had deepened their professional partnership in unexpected ways. #Royal Guard Story Part 3. The private room secured by Detective Inspector Wells was a small but elegant space typically used for VIP meetings at Grosvenor House. Morrison conducted a quick security sweep while Princess Charlotte examined the extent of the damage to her dress in the full-length mirror. The tear extended nearly 6 inches along the side seam, and the delicate beadwork had separated from the silk in several places. Her heart sank as she realized the garment might be beyond immediate repair. Morrison positioned himself near the door, maintaining security protocols while giving the princess privacy to assess her situation. His mind raced through potential solutions, drawing on his military training's emphasis on rapid problem-solving under pressure. The princess was scheduled to give concluding remarks to the media in 15 minutes, followed by individual interviews with several major news outlets. Canceling these appearances would generate far more negative attention than the original dress problem. Princess Charlotte's lady-in-waiting, Sarah Chen, arrived within minutes carrying an emergency wardrobe kit that included basic sewing supplies, safety pins, and a portable steamer. Sarah had been managing royal wardrobe crises for 8 years, and her calm efficiency immediately brought a sense of relief to the tense situation. She examined the damage with professional expertise while calculating repair options under severe time constraints. The silk fabric's delicate nature made traditional sewing repairs impossible without proper equipment and time. Sarah's assessment confirmed Morrison's fears. This was beyond a quick fix that could be managed in the available time frame. The princess would need either a complete change of clothing, which would require returning to Kensington Palace and significantly disrupting the day's schedule, or an alternative solution that could maintain her dignity while completing the remaining public appearances. Morrison stepped forward with a suggestion that surprised everyone in the room. His military experience had taught him improvisation skills that could be adapted to civilian crisis management. He proposed using his own uniform jacket to create a sophisticated wrap-style covering that would conceal the damaged area while appearing intentionally fashionable rather than emergency damage control. The suggestion was unconventional but potentially brilliant in its simplicity. Princess Charlotte considered this proposal carefully, recognizing both its practical benefits and its symbolic implications. Having her protection officer's jacket serve as part of her outfit would send an interesting message about the collaborative relationship between royals and their security teams. More importantly, it would allow her to complete her scheduled appearances without the embarrassment of a visible wardrobe malfunction or the negative publicity of cancelled media commitments. Sarah Chen immediately began visualizing how Morrison's jacket could be adapted into an elegant wrap. The dark navy color would complement the powder blue dress beautifully, and the military-style tailoring could add an unexpected but sophisticated element to the overall look. She began measuring and pinning, using her expertise to transform what could have been a crisis into a unique fashion statement that might even generate positive media attention. Detective Inspector Wells coordinated with the venue management to extend the princess's preparation time by another 10 minutes, explaining that she was making some final adjustments to her appearance before the media sessions. This delay would allow Sarah to complete her alterations while giving Morrison time to prepare for the unconventional situation of having his clothing become part of the royal outfit he was supposed to protect. As Sarah worked on the jacket modifications, Princess Charlotte found herself studying Morrison with new appreciation. His quick thinking had saved her from embarrassment during the photography session, and now his willingness to literally give her the coat off his back demonstrated a level of dedication that went beyond normal professional duty. She began to understand that her feelings toward him had evolved beyond simple gratitude for his protection services. Morrison watched Sarah's skilled work while mentally adjusting his security protocols for the remainder of the event. Operating without his jacket would require some adaptations to his equipment positioning, but these were minor concerns compared to ensuring the princess could complete her appearances with dignity intact. His primary concern remained her welfare, both professional and personal, though he tried not to examine too closely why her comfort mattered so much to him. The jacket transformation progressed beautifully under Sarah's expert hands. She created an elegant wrap that draped naturally across the princess's shoulders and strategically covered the damaged area of the dress while looking completely intentional. The military-inspired styling actually enhanced the overall outfit, giving it a contemporary edge that fashion commentators would later praise as innovative and meaningful. Princess Charlotte examined her reflection in the mirror, amazed by Sarah's skill in turning crisis into opportunity. The modified jacket created a sophisticated layered look that appeared completely planned rather than improvised. More significantly, wearing Morrison's jacket made her feel protected in a way that went beyond physical security, though she wasn't ready to fully acknowledge these feelings even to herself. Detective Inspector Wells received word that the media representatives were becoming curious about the extended delay. The charity director was fielding questions about whether there were any problems, and the photographers were starting to speculate among themselves about possible issues. The team needed to conclude their crisis management quickly before the delay itself became a story requiring explanation. Morrison reviewed his adjusted security positioning for the media appearances, ensuring he could maintain proper protection protocols despite the unconventional circumstances. His shirt and tactical vest would be visible without the jacket, but the Royal Protection Unit's professional appearance standards meant this wouldn't appear inappropriate or unprofessional. If anything, it might demonstrate the security team's dedication to their duties under challenging circumstances. Sarah completed the final adjustments and stepped back to admire her work. The jacket wrap looked stunning, transforming what had been a potential disaster into a fashion-forward statement that perfectly complemented Princess Charlotte's natural elegance. The powder blue silk and navy wool combination created a sophisticated color palette, while the contrast between feminine royal styling and masculine military tailoring generated visual interest that would photograph beautifully. Princess Charlotte turned to Morrison with a smile that conveyed much more than simple gratitude. His jacket felt warm against her shoulders, carrying his subtle cologne scent and somehow making her feel safer than any amount of security protocol could achieve. She realized that somewhere during their months of working together, Captain James Morrison had become much more than her protection officer, though the implications of this recognition would have to wait for private consideration. The time had come to return to the public areas and complete the scheduled media appearances. Morrison opened the door and conducted a final security sweep of the corridor while Sarah packed up her emergency kit. Princess Charlotte took a deep breath, drawing strength from the warmth of Morrison's jacket and the knowledge that he would be standing nearby throughout whatever challenges the remainder of the day might present. As they walked toward the ballroom where the media waited, Morrison found himself in the unusual position of monitoring threats to someone wearing his own clothing. The situation felt strangely intimate despite the professional context, and he had to consciously maintain his focus on security protocols rather than the way his jacket perfectly complemented the princess's natural grace and beauty. The media representatives were immediately struck by Princess Charlotte's sophisticated appearance when she emerged for her concluding remarks. The jacket wrap created a polished, contemporary look that several fashion journalists immediately began photographing from multiple angles. Rather than noticing any problems, they seemed impressed by what appeared to be a deliberate style choice that demonstrated the princess's evolving fashion sense. Princess Charlotte delivered her concluding remarks with characteristic warmth and sincerity, thanking the charity organizers, the attending families, and everyone who had made the day's success possible. Her words carried genuine emotion as she described the inspiring children she had met and the important work being done to expand educational opportunities for disadvantaged youth across London. Morrison stood at his usual position during royal addresses, though the absence of his jacket created a slightly different dynamic. Several media representatives seemed to notice the change in his appearance, but their attention remained focused on the princess's speech rather than analyzing the security arrangements. The crisis management had been successful beyond their most optimistic expectations. The individual media interviews proceeded smoothly, with journalists primarily interested in discussing the princess's growing role in education advocacy and her impressions of the day's activities. The jacket wrap continued to photograph beautifully, and several fashion reporters made positive comments about the princess's increasingly confident style choices. What had begun as a potential embarrassment was generating exactly the type of positive coverage the royal communications team hoped to achieve. During a brief break between interviews, Princess Charlotte caught Morrison's eye and mouthed a silent thank you that conveyed depths of meaning beyond the immediate crisis they had navigated together. He responded with a barely perceptible nod that acknowledged not only her gratitude but also the growing connection between them that neither was quite ready to address openly. The final interview of the day was with a prominent broadcaster known for asking challenging questions about royal relevance and public spending. Princess Charlotte handled these inquiries with composure and intelligence, explaining her personal commitment to education advocacy and the measurable impact of royal patronage on charitable organizations. The sophisticated appearance created by Morrison's jacket seemed to reinforce her credibility as a serious advocate rather than merely a ceremonial figure. As the media sessions concluded, Morrison began coordinating the departure procedures while Princess Charlotte made final goodbyes to the charity organizers and venue staff. The day that had begun with such promise, nearly derailed into embarrassment, and ultimately succeeded beyond expectations was drawing to a close. However, both the princess and her protector understood that the events of the afternoon had changed something fundamental in their relationship that would require careful consideration in the days ahead. The return journey to Kensington Palace proceeded smoothly, with preliminary media reports already praising both the charity event's success and the princess's elegant appearance. Morrison sat in his usual position, though without his jacket he felt oddly exposed despite the privacy of the royal vehicle. Princess Charlotte remained quiet during the drive, processing the day's events and the confusing emotions they had stirred regarding the man charged with protecting her life. #RoyalGuard story. Part for the royal convoy arrived at Kensington Palace as the late afternoon sun painted the historic buildings in golden hues. Princess Charlotte remained wrapped in Morrison's jacket during the short walk from the vehicle to the palace entrance, the navy wool now feeling like a comforting embrace rather than an emergency solution. Palace staff who noticed the unusual addition to her outfit assumed it was an intentional fashion choice, having learned not to question the princess's increasingly confident style decisions. Morrison followed standard protocol by escorting Princess Charlotte to her private apartments, though the absence of his jacket made him acutely aware of how the day's events had blurred the careful professional boundaries he worked so hard to maintain. The successful crisis management should have felt like a routine victory, but something about the intimate nature of their collaboration had stirred feelings he wasn't prepared to examine too closely. Princess Charlotte's private sitting room provided a welcome sanctuary after the day's public activities. She moved to the tall windows overlooking the palace gardens, still wearing Morrison's jacket as she processed the complex emotions the afternoon had awakened. The successful charity event should have been her primary focus, but instead she found herself thinking about the man who had protected not just her physical safety but her dignity when she needed it most. Morrison completed his security sweep of the apartment while trying to ignore how natural Princess Charlotte looked wearing his jacket in her private space. Professional protocol demanded that he maintain emotional distance from his charges, but months of working closely with her had revealed qualities that challenged his ability to see her merely as an assignment. Her genuine compassion, quick intelligence, and graceful handling of pressure had earned his deep respect, though he suspected his feelings had evolved beyond professional admiration. Sarah Chen arrived to help Princess Charlotte change out of the damaged dress and return Morrison's jacket, though both the princess and her protection officer seemed reluctant to end this tangible connection between them. The afternoon's crisis had created an intimacy that neither quite knew how to process within their established professional relationship. The jacket had become a symbol of trust and collaboration that went beyond normal royal protocol. As Sarah carefully removed the damaged dress for professional cleaning and repair, Princess Charlotte found herself studying Morrison's reflection in the mirror. His composed exterior couldn't quite mask the way his eyes lingered on her, and she realized that the attraction she had been trying to ignore was clearly mutual. The recognition both thrilled and terrified her, given the impossible complications such feelings would create for both their careers and personal lives. Morrison accepted his jacket back with appropriate professional courtesy, though his fingers brushed against Princess Charlotte's hand during the exchange in a way that felt far from accidental. The brief contact sent electricity through both of them, a moment of connection that couldn't be dismissed as imagination or wishful thinking. They were crossing into dangerous territory that could jeopardize everything they had both worked so hard to achieve. Detective Inspector Wells arrived for the standard post-event debriefing, unaware of the emotional undercurrents flowing between the princess and her primary protection officer. Her focus remained on analyzing the security aspects of the day's crisis management, praising Morrison's quick thinking while documenting lessons learned for future protocol improvements. The successful handling of the wardrobe emergency would become a case study in creative problem-solving under pressure. Princess Charlotte participated in the security debriefing while struggling to concentrate on Wells's questions about crowd management and venue logistics. Her mind kept returning to the moment when Morrison had stepped behind her on the stage, his protective presence providing exactly the support she needed without hesitation or question. That level of instinctive understanding felt like something much deeper than professional duty. Morrison provided his incident report with characteristic thoroughness, documenting the timeline of events and his team's response without mentioning the personal impact the crisis had on his relationship with the princess. His training had taught him to separate professional analysis from emotional reaction, though this situation was testing those skills more severely than any previous assignment in his career. The debriefing concluded with praise for the entire team's handling of an unusual crisis that could have generated negative publicity for both the princess and the charity she was supporting. Instead, preliminary media analysis suggested the event was being hailed as one of her most successful public appearances, with particular praise for her sophisticated appearance and genuine connection with the attending children. As Wells and the other security personnel departed, Princess Charlotte found herself alone with Morrison for the first time since the crisis began. The silence between them felt charged with unspoken recognition of how the day's events had changed their dynamic. Both understood that they were standing at a crossroads that would require careful navigation to avoid damaging their professional relationship and, potentially, their careers. Morrison began his standard end-of-duty procedures, preparing to brief the evening security team about any ongoing concerns or special considerations. However, Princess Charlotte's request for him to stay for a private conversation caught him off guard. Such requests were unusual in their professional relationship, though not technically inappropriate if focused on security matters. The conversation that followed started with Princess Charlotte's gratitude for Morrison's protection during the dress crisis, but quickly evolved into something more personal than either had intended. She found herself sharing her feelings about the loneliness of public life and the rarity of finding people who saw her as a person rather than merely a royal symbol. Morrison listened with the attention he usually reserved for security briefings, though his responses revealed his own struggles with the isolation that came with his protective role. As evening shadows lengthened across the sitting room, Princess Charlotte made a decision that terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. She told Morrison directly that her feelings for him had evolved beyond professional respect, acknowledging the impossibility of their situation while admitting she could no longer pretend those feelings didn't exist. The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge they could either cross or retreat from forever. Morrison's response revealed the internal conflict he had been managing for months. His duty was to protect Princess Charlotte from all threats, but his growing feelings for her had become a threat to his professional objectivity that he could no longer ignore. He admitted that she had become far more than an assignment to him, though he emphasized the potentially catastrophic consequences such an admission could have for both their futures. The conversation continued late into the evening, with both Princess Charlotte and Morrison exploring the boundaries of what might be possible between them while acknowledging the enormous obstacles they would face. Royal protection officers were expected to maintain absolute professional distance from their charges, while members of the royal family faced intense scrutiny of their personal relationships that could destroy careers and reputations with a single misstep. Princess Charlotte's private secretary knocked on the sitting room door to remind her of a dinner engagement with foreign diplomats, interrupting their conversation at a crucial moment. Morrison immediately shifted back into professional mode, conducting security preparations for the evening's event while both of them processed the implications of what they had just shared with each other. The diplomatic dinner proceeded normally, with Morrison maintaining his usual protective positioning while trying to ignore how different everything felt after their private conversation. Princess Charlotte navigated the evening's social requirements with her typical grace, though she found her attention repeatedly drifting to the man whose presence had become both her greatest security and her most dangerous vulnerability. Later that night, as Morrison completed his final security reports, he realized that the day's dress crisis had been merely the catalyst for acknowledging feelings that had been building for months. The successful management of that emergency had demonstrated their ability to work together seamlessly under pressure, but it had also revealed the depth of connection that had developed between them beyond professional duty. Princess Charlotte lay awake in her private quarters, still feeling the warmth of Morrison's jacket around her shoulders and remembering the electricity of his brief touch when returning it to him. The day had started with nervous excitement about her solo charity appearance and had ended with the recognition that she was falling in love with a man whose career could be destroyed by her feelings. The media coverage the following morning praised the charity event's success and Princess Charlotte's elegant appearance, with several fashion magazines requesting details about her sophisticated jacket styling. Neither the princess nor Morrison could have predicted that a torn dress would lead them to confront feelings that would challenge everything they thought they understood about duty, loyalty, and the possibility of finding love within the constraints of royal life. Morrison reported for duty the next morning with the knowledge that his relationship with Princess Charlotte had fundamentally changed, though both of them would need to navigate their new reality with extreme care to protect not only their own futures but also the reputation of the royal family and the integrity of the protection services that kept them safe. The torn dress, now being expertly repaired by the royal wardrobe staff, would be preserved as a reminder of a successful charity event. However, for Princess Charlotte and Morrison, it would forever symbolize the day they recognized that some bonds formed in service can transcend the duties that created them, even when acknowledging those bonds threatens everything they have worked to achieve. Royal Guard Story, Part 5. The weeks following the charity gala brought unprecedented media attention to Princess Charlotte's public appearances, with fashion commentators particularly intrigued by what they perceived as her evolving style sophistication. The jacket wrap that had been born of crisis was being hailed as evidence of her growing confidence and fashion intelligence, leading to increased scrutiny of her clothing choices that ironically made Morrison's job more complex as photographers sought closer shots of her outfits. Morrison found himself walking an increasingly difficult line between professional duty and personal feelings as he observed Princess Charlotte navigate this heightened attention. Every public appearance required him to maintain his protective focus while trying to ignore how beautiful she looked or how her smile could light up an entire room. The knowledge that she shared his feelings made their professional interactions both easier and infinitely more complicated. Princess Charlotte's schedule intensified significantly after the charity event's success, with multiple organizations requesting her patronage and media outlets seeking interviews about her educational advocacy work. Each new appearance required extensive security planning from Morrison's team, though he found himself paying even closer attention to details that might affect her comfort or safety, a level of concern that went beyond standard protection protocols. The Royal Communications team, led by seasoned press secretary Victoria Hartwell, noticed subtle changes in the dynamic between Princess Charlotte and her protection detail during public events. Morrison's positioning remained professionally appropriate, but there was an attentiveness in his demeanor that seemed to go beyond routine duty. Hartwell filed these observations in the back of her mind while focusing on managing the princess's increasingly positive media coverage. Detective Inspector Wells also began noticing changes in Morrison's approach to protection assignments, though she attributed his heightened vigilance to the successful handling of the dress crisis rather than personal feelings. His incident reports had become even more detailed than usual, and his advanced security surveys for upcoming events showed a level of thoroughness that impressed even his experienced colleagues. Princess Charlotte struggled to concentrate during official briefings as she found herself distracted by Morrison's presence in the room. His professional demeanor couldn't completely mask the way his eyes would seek hers during security discussions, creating moments of silent communication that felt dangerously intimate despite the formal setting. She began to understand how difficult it would be to maintain their secret while working together daily. The situation became more complex when Princess Charlotte received an invitation to attend a state dinner at Buckingham Palace honoring the Prime Minister of Sweden. The formal event would require extensive security coordination and would place both her and Morrison under intense scrutiny from senior royal staff, government officials, and international media representatives. The high-profile nature of the event would test their ability to maintain professional boundaries while managing their personal feelings. Morrison spent days coordinating security arrangements for the state dinner, working closely with the Metropolitan Police and diplomatic protection services to ensure seamless safety coverage for all attending dignitaries. His meticulous planning was motivated partly by professional pride but increasingly by his determination to ensure Princess Charlotte could focus on her official duties without worrying about security concerns. Princess Charlotte's preparation for the state dinner involved multiple wardrobe fittings, briefings on Swedish cultural protocols, and rehearsals of the formal dining procedures that would be scrutinized by protocol experts and media representatives. Throughout these preparations, she found herself thinking about how Morrison would look in his formal dress uniform and wondering if he would be positioned where she could see him during the lengthy dinner service. The evening of the state dinner arrived with typical royal pageantry, as dignitaries from across Europe gathered at Buckingham Palace for an event that would generate significant diplomatic and media coverage. Princess Charlotte wore a stunning emerald green gown that complemented the formal decorations while photographing beautifully under the palace's historic chandeliers. Morrison, in his dress uniform, coordinated security arrangements while trying to ignore how breathtaking she looked. During the pre-dinner reception, Princess Charlotte moved gracefully through conversations with Swedish officials, European ambassadors, and British government ministers. Morrison maintained his protective positioning while observing the complex social dynamics that required the princess to be charming, informed, and diplomatically appropriate with dozens of important guests simultaneously. His admiration for her skills in these situations deepened his respect for the challenges she faced in public life. The formal dinner proceeded with elaborate ceremony in the palace's grand ballroom, where Princess Charlotte was seated between the Swedish Prime Minister and the British Foreign Secretary. Morrison positioned himself strategically to monitor the room while maintaining visual contact with the princess, a standard procedure that felt different now that personal feelings complicated his professional focus. Midway through the dinner service, a minor crisis developed when the Swedish delegation's interpreter fell ill suddenly, creating communication challenges for several important conversations between government officials. Princess Charlotte, who spoke fluent Swedish from her university studies, offered to assist with translation duties, a gesture that impressed the diplomatic representatives while creating additional security considerations for Morrison's team. As Princess Charlotte moved between tables to facilitate conversations, Morrison adjusted his positioning to maintain proper protection coverage while allowing her the freedom to fulfill her diplomatic responsibilities. The situation required split-second decision-making about security protocols versus diplomatic necessity, the type of judgment calls that Morrison had learned to navigate through years of experience protecting royals in complex social situations. The evening's most challenging moment came during the after-dinner reception, when Princess Charlotte was engaged in deep conversation with the Swedish Prime Minister about international education initiatives. A photographer, hoping to capture candid shots of the diplomatic exchange, moved aggressively close to their conversation, creating both a security concern and a potential diplomatic incident if the Prime Minister felt his privacy was being violated. Morrison intervened smoothly but firmly, positioning himself between the photographer and the conversation while maintaining appropriate diplomatic courtesy. His action protected both Princess Charlotte's discussion and the Prime Minister's comfort, demonstrating the type of proactive security management that had earned him recognition throughout his career. However, Princess Charlotte's grateful smile when she caught his eye afterward felt like a reward worth more than any professional commendation. The state dinner concluded successfully with positive coverage focusing on the strengthened diplomatic relationships and Princess Charlotte's impressive knowledge of Swedish culture and policy issues. Morrison's security team received praise from senior palace officials for their seamless management of a complex event involving multiple protection challenges and diplomatic sensitivities. During the post-event debriefing, Victoria Hartwell mentioned observing the excellent coordination between Princess Charlotte and her protection team, particularly noting Morrison's anticipation of potential problems before they developed into actual issues. Her comments were meant as professional praise, but Morrison found himself wondering if she had noticed something beyond standard security procedures. As the palace emptied of guests and staff, Princess Charlotte found herself alone with Morrison during the final security sweep of her route back to her private apartments. The formal atmosphere of the state dinner had created distance between them throughout the evening, making this moment of privacy feel even more charged with the feelings they had been suppressing for hours. Princess Charlotte thanked Morrison for his protection during the evening, particularly his handling of the aggressive photographer situation. Their conversation began professionally but quickly became more personal as they acknowledged how difficult it had been to maintain appropriate distance during such an emotionally charged public event. The formal setting had intensified their awareness of each other rather than diminishing it. Morrison admitted that watching Princess Charlotte excel in her diplomatic role had deepened his admiration for her intelligence and grace under pressure, qualities that made maintaining professional objectivity increasingly challenging. She responded by sharing her appreciation for the way he anticipated her needs and protected her ability to focus on her official duties without worrying about security concerns. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Detective Inspector Wells, who needed Morrison's signature on final incident reports for the evening. The interruption reminded both of them how carefully they needed to manage their interactions to avoid arousing suspicion that could damage both their careers and the reputation of the Royal Protection Services. As Morrison completed his official duties for the evening, Princess Charlotte returned to her private quarters with the knowledge that their feelings were becoming increasingly difficult to hide. The success of the state dinner had demonstrated their professional compatibility, but it had also revealed how much more meaningful their work together had become since acknowledging their personal connection. The morning newspapers praised the state dinner as a diplomatic success, with particular attention to Princess Charlotte's sophisticated handling of complex international conversations. The coverage reinforced her growing reputation as a serious royal representative capable of meaningful contributions to Britain's diplomatic relationships, achievements that Morrison took personal pride in protecting and facilitating. However, both Princess Charlotte and Morrison understood that their personal relationship was approaching a crisis point where they would need to make difficult decisions about their future together. The successful management of public duties while navigating private feelings had proven more challenging than either anticipated, and the risk of discovery was creating stress that threatened to affect their professional performance. The charity event that had brought them together through crisis had evolved into a love story that challenged everything they thought they understood about duty, loyalty, and the possibility of finding happiness within the rigid constraints of royal life. The torn dress had been repaired and returned to the princess's wardrobe, but the bond it had helped create between her and her protector would prove much more difficult to mend if the weight of their impossible situation forced them apart. As they faced the reality that their feelings could no longer be ignored or dismissed as temporary attraction, Princess Charlotte and Morrison began considering whether their love was worth the enormous risks it posed to their careers, their reputations, and the institutions they had both sworn to serve with honor and dedication.